Well, hello, y'all. It is time to breathe again on the latest breath of fresh air. Oh, rewind that. It's time to breathe again on the latest BOFA Sports Webcast, streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. I am Charles Taylor, and I don't have Patrick Brackett with me tonight because we'll just call Patrick a late scratch. He's spending some time with his family. His son had a basketball game, so best of luck to his son in the basketball game, and hopefully Patrick can rejoin us next week around this time. So let's get started with the college football review. I guess the biggest takeaways was Georgia beating Tennessee 31-17. We'll go ahead and start that off with Patrick. But what you saw in that game was Georgia, based off of what we had discussed last week, coming off of their loss against Ole Miss, Georgia went back mostly to running the football and playing good defense and having Carson Beck throw more on schedule. There's a little bit more play action that was happening. And frankly, Carson Beck played better. He played a lot better than he has been playing. And I think something got woken up there. I mean, it didn't look good at the beginning. Tennessee was winning 10-0, and Carson Beck had an important run during a drive where he got a first down and he ran over a Tennessee defender. And I think that got him going, that got the team motivated, and Georgia was able to carry all that out to a 31-17 victory. So what this game tells you is, even though Georgia does have two losses to Alabama and to Ole Miss, they are still in the mix. They are still in the running for a college football playoff berth. More on those in a minute, more on the rankings in a minute. But Georgia is still right there in the mix. You cannot ignore them. And this is just one of those seasons where I don't think anything is really a certainty. I mean, when you look at what else had transpired before moving on from the Georgia game, Oregon, they almost got beat by Wisconsin this week, number one team in the nation. They went up to Madison and they had to struggle, get a couple of points, get some stops in the fourth quarter to pull that game out 16-13. So there is nothing that is set in stone. BYU, the only undefeated team in the Big 12, they got a loss against Kansas late on Saturday night. So there are still a lot of things up in the air. There's no telling who's going to get these spots. And what Georgia reminded everybody of is, even though they haven't been as good as what we've seen in the last few years, the defense might not quite be as good as it has been. The offense might not have as many weapons as they've had. Georgia's still a threat, and they, on any given day, can go out there and beat anybody. There's still a lot of talent there. Kirby Smart can still coach, and as long as they're able to play on schedule and not put Carson Beck back there 40, 50 times, Georgia has a real shot to do some things. So I think that's what that game served as a reminder of. And if you're Tennessee, you're not out of it either. You have your second loss of the year, but they're still in the mix. They can still get into the playoffs just like Georgia can. So it really just boils down to taking care of what's in front of you, win these last couple of games, and see how everything works out. The SEC is still anyone's guess. You have my team, Texas, who had a tough win against Arkansas. As expected, this is a rivalry game. Arkansas hates us. So I knew coming in that was going to be a tough game. 20-10 was the final score there, but Texas is still sitting there with one loss, along with Texas A&M in the SEC. And as long as Texas takes care of their business against Kentucky, and A&M, they have a tricky game on the road in Auburn. But as long as those two games go, I guess, according to schedule, if there is any such thing as a schedule these days, then you will have those two teams. I'm hyped up for that one, but those two teams will meet for the SEC regular season title and a berth in the SEC championship game come Thanksgiving weekend in College Station. So lots still in the air. Going off of the games that we had picked from last weekend, you got South Carolina beating Missouri. South Carolina's in that mix too. They've been playing some really good football lately, and even though they have 3 losses, if some things fall their way, maybe they can sneak in there. But they are starting to peak at the right time. Colorado with BYU's loss, now they are sitting squarely on the cusp of a Big 12 championship game. And we'll see what happens going forward. But Colorado is very much in the mix. Although BYU still holds that number 1 spot in the Big 12, Colorado is right there on their tail. Tulane blowing out Navy 35-0. That was pretty surprising to me. I know Navy hadn't been playing that well, and we both picked Tulane to win that game, but for Tulane to win 35-0, that was surprising. And then Clemson defeated Pitt 24-20. Pitt came back and made that a game, and then Cade Klubnik was able to break off a 50-yard touchdown run to put that game away for Clemson. And Arizona State went into Manhattan and knocked off Kansas State. So Arizona State, they're another team that you have to look out for in that Big 12 race to see if they can get that automatic berth from that conference. So that pretty much does it for the review section. Before we get into the preview, before we get into the preview and the Pick'em Challenge, let's go through some of these rankings. And those bad boys came out about an hour and a half ago or so. The big thing to take away from this ranking or this show or this edition of the college football playoff rankings is Boise State is now in your top 4 of the conference champions. You'll have your Power 4, which is of course the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and ACC, and then I guess your highest ranked group of 5 conference winner. Well, Boise State is in your top 4. Now, of course, according to the bracket, if you are in that top 4, that is a bye. That's an automatic bye into the quarterfinal round. So that's very important. And BYU is the team that now goes into the first round. So as it stands right now, your 12-5 matchup is BYU against Ohio State. That game will be in Columbus. Alabama and Notre Dame would play in the 9-8 matchup. Notre Dame would be the home team there. Your 11-6 matchup is Georgia at Penn State. Penn State would host, and Ole Miss would go to Indiana in your 10-7 matchup. And as mentioned, Boise State is your 4th seed, and making your top 3 is Oregon, Texas, and Miami. So again, lots of things to determine. The Miami thing is interesting because they're not even the top in the conference right now. SMU is the top team in their conference in the ACC, but as projections go and who's seated higher, Miami gets that nod. So everything else, that will be determined soon, of course, as these games continue to roll on in. But again, the important thing in my estimation to take away is that Boise State has broken through that top 4. I know people have been wondering about Indiana, saying Indiana is being disrespected. Well, here you are. They're 7th in these rankings. in seventh in terms of the bracket, but they're actually fifth in the rankings. So they broke into the top five. I don't know what all you are looking for the people who are saying Indiana's disrespected. I don't know how much you want to see or how much more you want to see, but they're top five right now. And as we will discuss in a minute, they have a huge game coming up to show they belong. So with that being said, to close off, these rankings are there's 2 more weeks in the regular season before we get to the conference championship game or the conference championship weekend. But Boise State breaking through on that top 4 line. That's the big news for me. So now let's get into your BOFA Sports College Football Pick'em Challenge, and let's show this scoreboard here. Now, Patrick and I, we didn't disagree on any of the games. So we both had good records and we both went 5-1. The one loss was the Arizona State, Kansas State one. We had Kansas State winning, but of course Arizona won 24, or Arizona State won 24-14. So 5-1 over, or 5-1 records last week. Patrick still has a 3-game lead on me in the picks. He's 41-19. I'm 38-22, and neither one of us have gotten exact prediction on the final scores right as of yet. So I got to make up some ground, but there's plenty of time to do it because we have 2 more weeks left in the regular season. We have conference championship weekend, and of course, we're going to pick the playoff games once they start on December 20th. So let's get into this week's schedule. And I had the task of picking the games here since Patrick's not with me to pick a few of them. And he will send me his scores and who he's picking based off of the games that I talk about on this show. So let's jump into the schedule, the 6 that I have picked out, and we'll start with Army and Notre Dame. So these 2 teams will be playing in at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx borough of New York City. Got to make sure I call it borough. The New York people will get off me if I get that wrong. But they will be playing in Yankee Stadium. And there's a lot on the line here. And as I mentioned, Notre Dame, as they sit right now, is the 8th seed in the latest edition of the college football playoff rankings. And because they don't have any type of a conference championship to worry about, they need all the wins they can get. So playing an undefeated Army team who's in I think they're in the top 20, the top 15, top 20. Maybe they were 21. I don't know. I have to go back and look at those exact rankings. But they're undefeated and coming in playing well. So I give Army a shot in this game to win. We know they are going to run the football. They're going to have the wishbone attack going on, and they've mixed in some passing to go with that. I just don't know if they have enough to match what Notre Dame is bringing. And I just think the talent pool it's bigger for Notre Dame than it is for Army. When it comes to a lot of these games, when you have teams that are kind of close in record, one of the things I like to look at is what team has the bigger margin for error. Meaning, if there is a mistake, if there is a turnover, if there is a special teams bust where somebody runs back a kickoff return or a punt return for a touchdown, how quickly can they recover from that? And I think Notre Dame's margin of error is bigger than Army's. I think Army has to play a little bit more of a perfect game to win than Army would have to. And while I think Army will show themselves to be very worthy and they will give Notre Dame a lot to handle, I just think Notre Dame will have a little bit too much for them. So my final score in this game would be I think we're going to go Notre Dame winning. I think it would be kind of low scoring. Maybe not. No. I think they'll win 31-20. Yeah, I'll go 31-20 Notre Dame to win. I think they'll pull away in the fourth quarter. I think Army will play really well, particularly early in the game as well. But I just think the depth and the strength in numbers will catch up with Army later on in the game. So 31-20 Notre Dame is my final score for that game. Let's go over to the Big Ten, and this one's interesting to me. Penn State goes to Minnesota. Now, Minnesota, they've had a okay year. They're sitting at 6-4, but they're a tough team to beat in up there in Minnesota. Penn State, y'all know how I feel about Penn State by now. Penn State is not good to me. Anytime they play anybody worthy, like Ohio State, they don't show up. They fall on their face. They go ultra conservative, and they just do not. They don't do the stuff that they have shown they can do against all these other teams they play. James Franklin has shown he's not a guy who coaches well in the bigger games. But when they play a team like Minnesota, they just have enough to beat them because of the talent pool. And even though this game is being played in Minneapolis and Minnesota will show up, they will be tough, they will be gritty, they'll be gutty. I don't know if they have enough explosiveness to beat Penn State. So I believe this game will be pretty close, though, kind of like the Army Notre Dame game. But I don't think Minnesota has enough. I will say this: if Minnesota was able to pull this game out, would not surprise me at all, not remotely. If Minnesota was able to win this game, but I think Penn State will have enough to pull it out. I think they'll win. I think it'll be by a touchdown. We'll go 27-21 for that score, with Penn State beating Minnesota. Let's go on over to the Big 12, and this game has turned into an interesting one pretty much overnight, because you have Arizona State. We mentioned they beat Kansas State. They will host BYU, who's coming off their first loss of the year at home against Kansas. Now, BYU, I get the season is one of a lot of twists and turns, and you just have to survive in advance. You take the win how you can get it. Style points, not really concerned about it. You're just trying to win, and give yourself a chance at the end of the year to where you can get into that college football playoff that has 12 teams. Having said that, BYU has had a lot of close calls. They pulled a last-second win out against Utah the week before losing to Kansas. They also had a close win against Oklahoma State, who I don't know what's happened to Oklahoma State. Between them and Florida State, I don't know who's had the worst free fall. But Oklahoma State played well in that game before losing it in the final seconds. We had talked about the game they had against SMU early in the year. That was an 18-15 contest. But BYU has had their moments where they could have been beaten, but they just found ways to make plays and keep their season, or at least their undefeated record, alive. It just didn't happen against Kansas. But with Arizona State, this is a team that has just kind of risen up, has just been getting better and better as the year's gone along, and them going to Manhattan and beating Kansas State like they did, that score, I mean, Kansas State made a run. I mean, it was 24-0 at one point. But Kansas State tried to make a run in the fourth quarter, missed the field goal, and they just fell behind by too much. But I think Arizona State they're on the way. They are coming. And I see them winning this game against BYU. And with that win, they're squarely in the running to get into the Big 12 championship game too, because they have 2 losses in the conference. I think they lost to Cincinnati and Texas Tech. But Colorado and BYU, they're leading right now with one loss. They beat BYU. That puts BYU at 2 losses. And because of the head-to-head, that would give Arizona State the nod. And I think they will beat BYU. I got Arizona State winning pretty solidly, as a matter of fact. I think they will win. I think it'll be something like 31. I'm going 31-17 here for Arizona State beating BYU. BYU has struggled to score in the last few games too, and Arizona State's defense is underrated, but they're good. Yeah, I have Arizona State winning by 2 touchdowns, and I think the BYU is starting to fall apart. I mean, they have a good team. They've been playing solid. I like their head coach, Kalani Sitake, but I think the loss to Kansas started to expose a few things, and I think Arizona State's going to take advantage of those. So 31-17, Arizona State winning over BYU. Let's stay in the Big 12 and talk about that other team that is in the running, the Colorado Buffaloes. So, look, we haven't really been sold on Colorado in terms of what they could be as a contender. They fell apart last year, as many people know, and the year didn't begin that great this year, especially when you consider how they got blasted in Nebraska earlier in the year, and then they had the close loss to Kansas State. But they have been putting it together. Coach Prime, Deion Sanders has been he's been coaching them up, and the team is playing very good complementary football. The defense is getting turnovers. They're getting sacks as well, pressure on the quarterback. The offense, they've been scoring points. That wasn't really a problem, getting them to score points. There's a lot of depth in that skill position, or in the skill positions for them. So they're going to be able to score on most teams. But now that you have the defense and the special teams catching up with them, some good complementary football being played by the Buffaloes. And of course, you have Travis Hunter, the two-way player, playing defense, playing offense, and by all indications, he's the front runner for the Heisman. They will be playing Kansas, as we mentioned. Kansas just defeated BYU on the road last week, and now Colorado visits them in Lawrence. This is a very tricky game for Colorado, and yeah, Colorado's been on a good streak, and I mean they beat Utah pretty solidly in that game. Utah has been falling apart, but it was just one of those games where you felt if Colorado wasn't careful, they could get beat. But Colorado took care of business, and they've been playing where they're not really playing with their food. I think this will be a close game, though, because Kansas looks like they're getting things together. They had struggled at the beginning of the year, but they have their starting quarterback, Jalen Daniels, back. And that dude is as dynamic of a playmaker as there is in the Big 12. So I think this will be pretty close here. But I do. Oh, this is gonna be close. You know what? I'm gonna go Kansas. Yes, I'm going Kansas. I think Kansas will spring the upset here. Yeah, I'm trying to see how Colorado is gonna handle success. Now they're starting to hear that hype. BYU fell down, so now they're sitting up there in one of those top 2 spots in the Big 12. Does it start to go to their head now? Because people are hyping it up. People are all about Colorado, trying to see them do well. And I don't have a problem with Coach Prime. I actually like Coach Prime. But there was a lot of hype surrounding them at the beginning. Like they were already here. They have already arrived. And in most cases, you have to go through a little bit of a rough patch, a little bit of some heartbreak before getting to that spot where you can win conference titles and maybe ultimately other national championships. I don't think Colorado is there yet, and I think Colorado is going to catch one of those losses. So I got Kansas winning. Like I said, this will be a close one. I got a 27-24 game, Kansas upsetting Colorado. For the last two games, let's stay in the Big Ten. And of course, the game of the week is Indiana going to Ohio State, going to Columbus. College game day will be there. And this is Indiana's shot. What are they? How good are they? And they will have a chance to have that signature win by going to the horseshoe and potentially beating the Buckeyes. Now, Indiana has been smashing everybody that's ahead of them, or everybody that's been on their schedule, and they look legit. I've seen Indiana play a couple of times this year. I haven't been paying too much attention to them, but the two games I did see, one was against Michigan, and then I saw it when they played Washington earlier in the year. But they came and they handled their business. They took care of what needed to be taken care of. Their defense might be the weaker part of their two sides of the ball there. I think they can score on pretty much anybody. They have a lot of weapons on that side. But the defense is a little bit leaky. And if they play someone better like Ohio State, that's where they can get exposed. I just think Ohio State has been the king of that conference. Well, no, take that back. Michigan won the last 3 years. But it takes someone like Michigan, somebody who is on par with Ohio State in terms of the talent pool, in terms of the physicality they can play with, to knock Ohio State off. I don't think Indiana is physical enough. I think they can score some points. I think they can get some passing yardage on them. But I just believe Ohio State is the better team. And until somebody other than Michigan and other than Oregon, two teams that are on par with Ohio State in terms of the talent, until I see someone else do that, I'm always going to pick Ohio State. And I think that's been consistent whenever we talk about Ohio State. When they're playing these Big Ten games, it's always a question of who can keep up with them. Michigan, the last 3 seasons before this year, has been that team. Oregon has shown they can hang and beat Ohio State. The other teams, not so much, just not on par with them in terms of the talent. And I think this will be the same case here. So I have Ohio State winning, and I think the running with Judkins and Will Howard will be the difference. I do think there will be some points scored in this game. But yeah, I have Ohio State winning. I think it'll be kind of pretty high scoring for a Big Ten game. I'm going to go 37-27, Ohio State winning this game. I just think once they get the running game going in the balance, I think it'll be too much for Indiana to overcome. Finally, let's go over to the SEC. There's not a lot of games in the SEC. Well, take that back. There are some games in the SEC. We talked about a few of them. Kentucky's visiting Austin to play Texas. Texas A&M has an interesting game in Auburn. Alabama goes to Oklahoma for the first time in a while, if they've ever been there at all. So there's some games there, but nothing that is your ranked versus ranked contest that you're looking forward to, and that's one of your marquee games in the schedule or on the schedule. So after looking through, I said, well, here's an interesting game. Let's look at Vandy and LSU. LSU has had it rough the last couple of weeks. So is Vandy actually as well. But LSU, after getting blown out at home by Bama, went down to the Swamp and got beat pretty soundly by the Gators, 27-16. And LSU did not look good. It looks like Brian Kelly is starting to lose the game. And I see you, Eric. Thanks for popping on. Yeah, Brian Kelly is getting all that karma back right now. And so they think they got whooped. I mean, Florida came in there, they put it on them, playing hard for Billy Napier, who has been kind of on the hot seat. But I guess the athletic director and the rest of the brass said he'll be back next year because the team has been improving. And this was one of those performances where it looked like everything started to come together for the Gators. And they have an interesting game at Ole Miss. Ole Miss, be careful going down to the Swamp. You could get beat if you're not careful. But LSU has had it really, really tough. Vanderbilt, kind of the same thing. They got whooped in South Carolina, or whooped by South Carolina a couple of weeks ago. And now this game is going to be in Baton Rouge. As bad as LSU has been looking, I still think LSU probably has enough to beat Vandy. Now, you heard Patrick talk about that home field advantage that all of a sudden has come to Nashville in the course of this year. But LSU doesn't have to worry about that. They're in Baton Rouge. It's a Saturday night game in Baton Rouge. I know it doesn't mean much when it comes to playing Alabama, but it still holds true for a lot of the other teams. And I don't think Vanderbilt has enough to go down to Baton Rouge and pull this win out on a Saturday night. I have LSU winning, recovering. I think Vanderbilt will show up. I don't think it will be any type of a blowout, really, but I think LSU can win by, we'll go 10, 14 points. And I do think it'll be pretty low scoring too. I'm going to go 27-13. Yeah, that sounds good. Actually, no, 27-17. 27-17, LSU will beat Vanderbilt. So that does it for the college football part of this show. That is the Pick'em Challenge, and we will update everything once Patrick gets those his picks and those scores to me off these games that I had circled. So let's move on to the NFL, and let's see. Going back and looking at what happened last week, there was some great games that came down to the wire, and also some. Well, not upsets. That's not an upset. I was gonna talk about the Bills beating the Chiefs, but that's not an upset. The Bills are 9-2 now. So, but they gave the Chiefs their first loss of the year, 30-21. Josh Allen he made plays down the stretch, and I like how Buffalo came and attacked. They attacked at the end of the game. They did not give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense. They didn't mess around, kick a field goal. Maybe the field goal gets missed, and now all Kansas City needs is a field goal to win. Or maybe they make the field goal, but if Kansas City gets a touchdown, they win. No, they went for it on that fourth down. Josh Allen made the play, put the game away. 30-21. Good job by the Bills. Let's see. How about the Chargers? The Chargers had to hold on. I mean, they had the Bengals down 27-6. The Bengals came back, tied it. Evan McPherson, he's been struggling. He's normally a very good kicker, but he missed 2 field goals down the stretch. The Chargers scored, got a touchdown, won that game 34-27. The Lions just continue to roll. I don't know what's happening to Jacksonville, but my goodness, 52-6. That's the Lions. I think that's their second game this year, scoring 50 points on somebody. Lions look really, really tough. And it looks like that road in the NFC will have to go through Detroit, although the Philly Eagles, who defeated the Washington Commanders 26-18 last Thursday night, they're right there. They're 8-2. And so it looks like it'll be a race between them to see who gets that number 1 seed in that bye in the NFC. the Chicago Bears, my goodness. I don't know how much bad luck you can have. But you're right there. You have a chance to win the game against the Packers, and you get your field goal blocked. It's it seems to be typical Bears. No matter how close they get, they just can't seem to make those plays. Now, you remember the Hail Mary that they got beat on by Washington, and now this is just heartbreak after heartbreak for the Bears, and now they're sitting in 4-6 with the way the rest of the teams in the NFC North is playing. Does not look good for them. You just mentioned Detroit. Minnesota is 8-2, and the Packers go to 7-3. So it's dire straits for those people who thought the Bears could win the division. That's not happening. And like me personally, I never thought it would happen, but there were some people who was on the Caleb Williams train. Pump the brakes on that. But hey, they were close. They just couldn't make that play. And then the Steelers, that's another team there. They're sitting at 8-2 now. They had a tight, it's your typical Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers game. No matter how good the offenses may be, these games just always seem to be in the teens and 20s. No matter when they play, no matter how they're playing, it's a typical Steelers Ravens game that comes down to the wire, and the defense is going to win 9 times out of 10 when these two teams get together. This time it was the Steelers' chance. The Steelers have actually dominated this rivalry in the last few years. I think they've won something crazy. Look me up on this, but I think they've won 8 of the last 9 contests, something like that. And this was another close win, 18-16, and now the Steelers are in firm control of the AFC North. You have the Seahawks going to San Francisco and beating the 49ers 20-17. 49ers look a little bit off. Something is not right with the team. I know George Kittle was out for the team, but they should have won this game. They had the ball with 3 minutes left in their possession, but they couldn't run any timeout. And then Geno Smith, with his legs, was able to get in there and steal the game for the Seahawks. So now what you have in the NFC West, you have all these teams sitting here 5-5. 49ers, Seahawks, the LA Rams are sitting there, but the Arizona Cardinals are the ones who are in first place in that division. So give credit to Arizona. I don't know how many people were expecting Arizona to be at first place at this point of the season, but they are, and they're coming off of their bye week, and they've been playing some good ball. So 49ers, they have some time to get it together, but their next 2 games, at Green Bay, at Buffalo. Tough sledding there for the Niners, and this is why they had to make sure they got that game on Sunday so they could go in with a 6-4 record. But now, not a lot of room for error. And then I'm going to talk about these 2 teams a little bit because it's just really comical to talk about the 2 teams in the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Jets. Now, listen, I'm not really going to talk about what they're doing on the field. They've been garbage on the field. Everybody knows they've been garbage on the field. And I mean, a lot of times I'm not trying to talk about them because why? Because they don't do anything on the field. But because one team plays in the number 1 media market in America, in New York City, and the other one is the most valuable franchise in all of sports, that's why they're always in your news, in your headlines, in your drama-filled session, I guess. But the Cowboys that got blasted by the Texans on Monday night, just mistake after mistake, just not looking good at all. Drop passes, Cooper Rush. I guess he's trying to do what he can, but it's not enough. And the Texans were able to pull away. And the Jets lost a close game to the Colts. How about Anthony Richardson coming back and looking like an NFL quarterback? And he was running and throwing, looking like that dual weapon. So give credit to those 2 teams for going in there and get those wins first. But you have comedy shows in both Dallas and New York. And I'll start with the Cowboys here because both of those teams, both of these teams are just, they were victims of bad ownership. And with the Cowboys, here's the thing with Jerry Jones. Now, look, we everybody knows Jerry Jones is the owner, the team president, and the general manager of the team. Here's why people say he needs to put the general manager hat down, or maybe the team president hat down. You will hear Jerry Jones, because he said this in multiple interviews. He will say, well, why would I put down any of those titles when I'm the one who's going to be signing the checks anyway, as the owner? That is true. That's not wrong. Absolutely. That is completely true. And he has every reason to feel that way. But as an owner, that's not the only thing he's owning. All right. He's a businessman. He is part of other businesses. He has a share in other businesses. And there's going to be meetings for those other businesses that's going to pull him away. That's going to pull him away from those meetings that he would have with the Cowboys. So therefore, he's not there in the day-to-day operations. The general manager of the team, on the other hand, is the person who is there day-to-day seeing those operations, because he's lockstep. Well, in theory, he's going to be lockstep with the head coach on how the team is built, what personality the team wants. And the GM and the head coach, they're the ones who's going to create that identity. And then your scouting department is going to go out here and see if they can find these players to fit what you were trying to do. With Jerry Jones being the owner is not going to be there every day. So Jerry Jones, the general manager, is not going to be lockstep with, in this case, Mike McCarthy in a lot of cases. And you can tell this because every time Jerry Jones comes on the radio, which is every Tuesday and Friday mornings during the season down there in Dallas, Fort Worth on their flagship station, 105.3 The Fan. I know this because I lived in Dallas, Fort Worth for over a decade. But with him not being there, what you end up hearing is Mike McCarthy will come on and he will say something on the radio. This will be normally Monday mornings. As soon as Jerry Jones gets on there, it's overstepping whatever Mike McCarthy has already said. And so there is a lot of not being on the same page that happens with the Cowboys, and it bleeds onto the field. And oh, by the way, you got a falling apart stadium. In AT&T Stadium, and I'll get more on the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight in a moment, but if you were a sports fan in AT&T Stadium this weekend, you have to see that pathetic performance by the Cowboys and that terrible fight. I mean, I guess the undercard was good. I mean, I didn't watch it. I heard the undercard was good, and I have seen clips of Mike Tyson's ass hanging out. Whatever. But Dallas, like I said, Jerry Jones, and Patrick and I have said this all along. As long as he's the owner, the Cowboys aren't winning anything. And now they have a roster that is full of albatross and garbage contracts and no depth on the team. And it's probably best for them right now to just start over. Maybe you go and you trade Micah Parsons away. Micah Parsons isn't as good as everyone makes him out to be anyway. You maybe see if you can get CeeDee Lamb out of there. I would just start all over. But what are you starting over to? Because Jerry Jones is still the owner, and it's still going to be a lot of the same thing. So you just have a hot mess in Dallas. Meanwhile, the Jets. So now you decide, if you're the owner, Woody Johnson, to fire the general manager, Joe Douglas, after saying he put together the best roster he has seen in like a quarter century. But the roster has not performed on the field. And they're sitting here at 3-8, going nowhere fast. And now the question is, are they going to start over? I mean, I think they probably should, but they done fired everybody. So if you're the owner, you done fired the head coach, Robert Saleh. You just fired the general manager, but you're still not addressing the problem. The problem is Aaron Rodgers, y'all. Aaron Rodgers is not that guy anymore. And it's okay to admit it. He's had a great career. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He has a Super Bowl title. I know people are going to say he should have had more, and probably he should have had more. But do you know how many players would just trade everything they've done in their careers to say they won a Super Bowl title? Aaron Rodgers at least has the one Super Bowl title he won in 2010 with the Packers. But he is not a guy that's bringing leadership to the team. And when things get tough, he's just going to throw them under the bus. Now, everything he has wanted, Joe Douglas made it happen. When he said, we just need to get some more weapons, if we can go ahead and get it, he went and got his boy, Devontae Adams. They got a good running back in Breece Hall. Garrett Wilson is already there. The offensive line is still a little suspect, but maybe they could have addressed that a little bit more. But the defense for the Jets, they're generally pretty good, but they haven't been playing up to par. I just think at this point, Aaron Rodgers is just bad for team culture. And it is coming through to the rest of the team to where certain plays aren't happening, certain things aren't happening when they're supposed to, and there's just a lot of just down faces. There's not a lot of enthusiasm there. It's almost like the Jets are giving up on the season at some points. But I mean, if you're the owner, Woody Johnson, you done sat there, you done fired everybody else, but you're not addressing the problem. And the longer you continue to think Aaron Rodgers is going to be the savior of the team and he's not an issue, then the more problems you're going to continue to have. And you're going to have a Packers situation where the Packers continue to give him all these contracts and do everything they could to keep him happy. And then it's just going to get to the point where they're just going to want him to go. It's just time for you to go. Nothing is getting better. You're not as good as you think you are. And it's just going to be time for changes. The Packers moved on. They had Jordan Love they could fall back on. So they weren't really worried about it. They were ready to move on without Aaron Rodgers because they'd done everything they could to make the dude happy. It was never enough. This is what the Jets did. This is their mess. They need to lie in it. They're getting flexed. They got flexed out of a Sunday night game. I think that's where they went to the Bengals and Chargers. It's a great thing because, I've been on the petition train saying the Jets and Cowboys don't need to be on no one's national TV game. So hopefully that continues. But people are going to talk about them because it is Aaron Rodgers and they do play in New York City. But it is just another story of ownership in New York City and in Dallas, Fort Worth, holding their teams back. Simply put, these owners are not doing anything to help these teams be successful on the field. Off the field, like I mentioned, Cowboys are the most valuable team in sports. So we know the brand they bring. We know the marketing they bring. We know when they are talked about, everyone's pockets get filled. But they haven't done anything on the field worth of note for decades now. And it's even worse this year. And I don't see it getting any better. And the Jets, they haven't made the playoffs since 2011. 2010. They haven't made the playoffs since 2010. I don't understand why the Jets get talked about. But that's it. It's what brings juicy headlines, I guess. It's definitely style over substance. And y'all know us. It's the reverse of what we're about. So ownership, terrible. And unless that changes, which it won't because owners aren't known to fire themselves, then you're going to continue to hear the same garbage story with the Jets and Cowboys. So moving on to the NBA. So there was something that came out about the Philadelphia 76ers. So they're sitting at 2-11. If you were able to catch us on Friday, we did a NBA little review and a preview of sorts. And we talked about how Philly is one of those teams that we discussed in the NFL with the Jets and Cowboys. Just one of these teams that are always talked about, but they don't do anything on the court. And here they are sitting at 2-11. There's plenty of time left, so maybe they can turn it around. But you haven't had your big three, your core three, play on the court together. So we're talking about Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey. And I guess there was a team meeting that was called after the loss to the Miami Heat on Monday night. And Tyrese Maxey called out Joel Embiid, basically saying, man, you're not here. You don't come here. You're never on time for stuff, whether it's team meetings, whether it's practices, whatever. But Tyrese Maxey said, man, dude, like, hey, I love you, but dude, you're supposed to be the leader of the team and you're not even setting a good example. It's about damn time someone called out Joel Embiid for that. And I probably think I would say the same thing probably goes for Paul George. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Paul George is good about being in practice. I don't know. But Paul George doesn't strike me as a great teammate either. So I just think this mix Philly has is just another example of Daryl Morey. And for those of y'all who know Daryl Morey, as a general manager, he was down there with Houston for the Rockets. And he's got that mentality of going big game hunting, just basically trying to put these all-star teams together. But there's no chemistry between the guys because A, it's just not a good mix. And B, there's the dudes don't stay healthy. What you have with Philadelphia are dudes and Embiid and George. It's damn near guaranteed they're going to miss some time. Guaranteed. I mean, they've missed time already, but it is guaranteed they're going to miss some part of the season. You have 82 games in the season. You'll be lucky if either one of those players play 55 or 60 of those games. You'll be lucky if that happens. And so far, they've been out of the lineup. Paul George had his knee issue, bone bruise on his knee. Embiid hasn't been in there. Maxey is hurt right now with a hamstring. And it's not good in Philly. And I'm not going to go as far as to say it's too late in the season. It's only November. So they have time to turn things around. And look, like I said, Philly will make a run. They will get these guys back at some point, and they will make a run in the East. And people will jump on that hype train and say, oh, this is the 76ers team that I was expecting. This is the 76ers team that I was looking for, the team that we felt could win a championship. Just warning y'all, don't fall for that hype. Philadelphia is not that team. They have players, with the exception of Maxey. I think Maxey's a dog. I think Maxey will, when it comes time, he's gonna do what he has to do. But I don't have any faith in Joel Embiid. As good as he's been in regular seasons, he won the MVP a couple of years ago. But I don't have any faith that he's going to show up in the playoffs, or at least not when it's needed. If there's a game 6 or 7 in the Eastern Conference semifinals, he's going to fade away there. He's not going to show up. The same with Paul George. I mean, Paul George has been called Pandemic P. I know he wants to call himself Playoff P, but when those moments are big, he consistently doesn't show up either. And if you're going to beat Boston, if you're going to beat Cleveland, if you're going to beat New York or some of these teams that you're potentially going to see in the playoffs, your big time players need to step up. And Phillies right now, they don't step up enough. So I don't have any faith in them, but I am glad to see Maxey call out Embiid and have these guys try to take some accountability for stuff. because that seems to be missing in Philadelphia. And if you don't have anybody stepping up and being leaders, then you're not going to win anything anyway. So I'm glad to see Maxey call it. I'm glad to hear he called people out. And maybe now Joel Embiid will get a fire lit up under his ass and be that dude. Hopefully he can stay healthy. I mean, because when he is in there, he's a beast. But just too many times he fades away in the stretch, and it seems like he can be a little bit lazy just looking at it from the outside. Not saying he is lazy, but looking at it from the outside, it just seemed like that he can be a little bit lazy. So I'm glad players were there to call him out. And then maybe this team meeting sparked something for the 76ers. And again, they might make a run, but I don't think it'll be anything that's sustained. So before we hop on out, like I said, I mentioned the fight weekend. I mentioned the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight. I wasn't trying to see that. I thought it was going to be a complete and utter sideshow. And that's mostly what I heard that the fight was, a complete and utter sideshow. I mean, it's good to see Mike Tyson in the ring. Maybe not at this advanced age, but I remember watching those fights back in the day, those fights he had with Evander Holyfield, the one with Lennox Lewis, although Lewis won that one pretty solidly. Just going back when he was the dominant Mike Tyson, those fights with Razor Ruddock, the dude who had stupid power, but was also hard to hit with this lateral movement. It was good to see him get in the ring, I guess, or I guess it was good to hear that he was getting in the ring. But I mean, I don't know. Now Jake Paul can say he beat Mike Tyson, and I just don't feel that doesn't sit well with me. And then over on the UFC side, you had John Bones Jones. He came back and he still looks dominant. I mean, this dude, no matter how much time he takes off, the dude is still a beast no matter what. So I think even though he's had a lot of outside the octagon issues, when he's in there, he's as good as there has been in the history of mixed martial arts. Point blank, period. And he proved it again by taking out Stipe Miocic. So with that, that will conclude this edition of the BOFA Sports Webcast. So that is what I am breathing on for tonight. Y'all make sure y'all visit the BOFA Sports YouTube channel. Smash that subscribe button and follow the BOFA Sports Facebook page. Also stay on the lookout for new Bro Epic material that Patrick is bringing. And I'll have to talk to him about how things are going with the giveaway he was doing, and if he's going to do anything more. And I'm sure he will get those words out to everybody as well. So just stay on the lookout for the Bro Epic material. Subscribe to that channel as well, because he's on YouTube and Instagram, along with some of the other social medias. So be on the lookout for those things. Be on the lookout for what's coming up for BOFA Sports as well. And you can catch us also on the podcast form. So wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, check us out there, because we're there. So until next time, everybody take care. Thanks for tuning in. And hopefully Patrick is back with me next week. So y'all take care. Enjoy the games, and we'll talk soon.